Okay, so part 3 of this series of videos. In this particular video, I'm going to show you how to create a unique ID for each of your primary keys. Now, for me personally, I like to use integers for primary IDs. Now, I appreciate that some of you have used a combination of integers and strings, which is fine as long as the integer keeps increasing by 1. You can keep the string the same, or you can change the string. That's fine, and just have a little function that or have a little line of code that adds a string and an integer. So here's what I'm going to do. So just a little kind of quick refresher. So I'd created a class called database, and that contains a private connection string. It also creates a connection which is protected so that inherited classes can use it. In the constructor, we check to see if the database exists, and if it does exist, if it doesn't exist, it creates the database, and then it creates a new connection, and the destructor is going to close the connection. And at the end of the last video, I'd also created a protected function which will get inherited that creates a command. We can use that command to add SQL to. Okay. I'd also created a class called customers, which reflects the table customers. It inherits from database. It has a function to create the table, and maybe really, I don't know, initialize. Should that be called create? I don't know. And then I also created a function add, which takes a name and an age and inserts that value into my database. Okay. Now, the trouble is, at the moment, I have defaulted the primary ID, the primary key, primary key, to 1. Okay, and the problem with this is that if I try and run it again, so if I go to the form, so I've added Bob and 23, and let's just add another person. Let's add Sue, and she's 22. Okay, so I'm just going to press the F5. So let's just step in here and just see what happens. Okay, so we're going to go over, step into F11, and we're going to come down here, and my string now is saying insert into customers values 1, Sue, 22. Now let's just have a quick look inside my database. Okay, so come on, load up. Quick. That's always the way, isn't it? Come on, the computer. What are you playing at? Oh, it might be. Is it because it's already opened? Anyway, okay. Well, that's obviously not loading up. But anyway, what's going to happen is when I actually try and execute this. Oh, here we go. Right, so there's already an entry in here for Bob. Okay, and there is already an ID called 1. And ID, according to the create, is the primary key. And what that means is that has to be unique. So if I try and execute it, boom. The changes you requested were not successful because they could not create duplicate values in the index primary key. Okay, so what we want is we want a system where we can make sure that this is unique. Now, what we could do is we could create a private int ID function here, and we could set it to 0 or something like that, and we could put ID in here, and plus ID. Oh, hang on, I've got this wrong. There we go. Plus quotation. There we go. So we could do that. Okay, and then at this point here, we could go ID plus plus, add 1 to ID. The problem is, every time I start the program, ID will be reset to 0 and we'll be back to square 1. That will not work. So what I'm going to show you is how to fix this problem. So the first thing I'm going to do, I am going to need an ID, okay, but that's going to be called get next ID, okay, because I'm going to create a function, and here's the function. So it's going to be private, okay? It doesn't need to be called outside of this class. Just keep it inside. Get next ID, okay? Now, if we go to the Word document that gives us all the information, there is a little bit down here. Creating a table. That's creating a table with a foreign key. There we go. Create a unique ID. Okay, now it tells you the SQL that we need. So ID is, in my case, the primary key. And I want to get the maximum number. Now, again, if you've got a primary key that's got string component, you're going to struggle with this. I'm not quite sure how you can do it. Probably you need to select all of them, and then you're going to have to put them into a list or something like that and parse it yourself and figure out which one is the most, the highest one, or just create IDs that are unique. But there's a risk, it's quite difficult creating unique things. This is why I think primary keys should be integers, and then we can do integer mathematics on it. So here we go. I'm just going to put that in there as a comment, just so that I can see. Right, so here we go. I need one of these, because I want to get commands. And my command, the text is going to be this. Now, bear in mind, it says name of your table. Well, the name of my table is customers. Okay. Right. And then I'm going to do command.execute. Oh, now. Right. Just stop. So back up. So now we're going to, so that's what I need to do. Now this returns a data set. So let's have a little look at the select. Now it is a select. So we need to go to this bit here. So at this point here, to run the command, I need this line of code here. This runs the query. Now the reason this is different to this line of code here is because when you do a select, it's actually going to create some form of data. Okay, and so it's slightly different. So we need one of them, and we also need to create a data set, and we're going to fill that data set. Okay, so I'm just going to paste that in. So this runs the command. This creates the data set, the values that are going to be returned, and this fills it. Now, what you have to bear in mind is that this data set is very generic, okay, and it will work for any SQL data set whatsoever. So it's not the easiest and most obvious thing to use. But let's just have a little look at my data. Now, if I were to do something like this, if I were to run this command here, select star from customers, what that means is select everything from the customers. And what I would get is basically something, forget that one there, that looks like this. So it would be a table. In this particular case, it would be a table that's got 3 columns and 2 rows. Now with this command, what I'm basically saying, so the SQL, what the SQL is saying is select the maximum ID from customers. So go to the table ID, or to go to the column, sorry, ID, and return the biggest one. And the biggest one in this particular case is going to be 2. So what I'm going to get returned is I'm going to get, you always get a table, so there you go, but it's going to be a table of 1. It's going to look like this. And it's just going to have the value 2 in it, because that's the biggest ID out of these 2. So we've got one table, which has 1 row and 1 column, and it's worth bearing in mind, this is where I'm going to need, and the column, so I'm going to just move this down. We just need to remember that the column is going to be called ID. Okay, so there are 2 things that we need to remember. So here we go. Here's the code that does it. Right. So the data set is the thing that we're going to use. And this is where I go back to my Word document, because it says here, each data set contains 0 or more tables. Each table contains an array of 1 or more rows, and each row contains a dictionary of 0 or more columns. Right, so the first thing we need is we want to get the table. There's always going to be at least 1 table, and to be perfectly honest, for all your things, there'll only ever be 1 table. So we need that line of code. So that's got my table. So now I have a handle on this thing here. I've got all of that. Okay, that's called table. And I know it's a D set. It should really be data set. Okay. Right, the next thing that I'm going to do is I need the row. I need row number 1. So here we go. So data row, I'm just going to call it row. There's only 1 row. So we can go table dot rows. Okay, and it's going to be row 0. And if you've got 2022, it's actually kind of doing a lot of the hard work for me. So that now gives me a handle on this. Okay, and the last thing I need is I want the ID from that 1 row. So the data, no, I need to just consult this. So here we go. So I'm going to call it ID. So int ID equals row. Now, because it's a dictionary, the way that you index a dictionary is using the array notation. However, we just put inside it the quotations of the thing we're after, and then I just need to convert that to a string. Now, because we're going for an int, this ain't going to work, so we need to convert it into an integer. Here we go. Convert to int 32. And that should be that. Now, the reason I have to do the toString is because this actually returns, I think, some form of object. And I'm not quite sure what kind of object it is. But if you do toString, it'll basically, in this particular case, in this example, it would return a string that is 2. And all I need to do then is convert that back into an integer. Hey presto, I'm sorted. So I've now got the ID. And now all I need to do is return. So now that returns the current highest ID. But I don't want it to be bigger. I want ID to be one more. Okay. And what you can actually do, I'll just do that. So I'll just say ID equals ID plus 1. So that gets the next one. And now I'm going to return ID. Okay. So now that has sorted it. Going back to my add, what I actually want to do is my ID now is the next ID. So it's going to go to the database, it's going to return the current highest ID, add 1 to it, and then that gives me this thing here. So let's run this and see if it works. So I'm going to put a breakpoint here. And I'm going to go back to my forms. Notice, by the way, that I've not done anything to do with my forms. And I'm going to add Sue. So here we go, F5. So that's going to build it. And we've got so I'm just going to take that breakpoint away so that when I press F5, it's going to break now here. Right, okay, so step in. So that's F11, F10 to step over. So here we go. So there's my command text. So let's just see if that works. Oh, hang on, what's going on? Why is it not doing it? Oh, hang on, is this gonna break? Oh no, okay. I'm not quite sure why it's not showing with the command text, but happy days. Okay, it's working. Right, dataset is new dataset, and then fill it. Right, here we go. So table, and let's just see what some of this what it looks like. Okay, so you can see now. There we go. Rows. We see inside there. So it's got one row, so we know it's worked. But it's kind of quite difficult to see. I think, can we go in results? No. Okay, so it's a little bit involved. But anyway, there we go. There's the row. Does that give anything useful? Probably not. Item array. Oh, there we go. Look, it's got the value. There it is, 1. That's what we're after. And so the ID. Oh, it didn't work. Right, why has it not worked? We've got ID. That's called ID. Right, I need to just pause. I'm just going to find out what didn't work and why it didn't work. Right, okay, so I figured it out. Okay, so the issue is this thing here, okay, and this is on me. In this particular case, we don't need to reference it like that. So row basically contains an array in this particular case. And so the array, we want the 0th element of the array, because if we just go back to our little table here we go. Look, it's just got one particular. So this is the 0th element of of an array of size 1. Okay, so let's try that again. So I do apologise for that, but I'm going to make mistakes on these videos, and I don't apologise for making those mistakes. I think it's really important that you watch people making mistakes so that you can kind of see how they get out of them. I just tried putting 0 in there. I had a hunch, but obviously you can resort to the documentation, the manuals and all that kind of stuff. The answers are out there on Google and Stack Overflow. So here we go. Let's have a little go. So get the table, get the 0th row, or the first row, and then get the 0th column of the row. And actually, do you know what? The answer was kind of in here. Look, there you go. Item arrays. It's an array, and position 0 is 1. That's what we're after. Okay, so we've got the ID now. There we go. The ID is 1. And we know that because if we look in our array, there we go. It's 1. The highest one is 1. So now we're going to go 1 plus 1 equals 2. We're going to return that. So now we've got 2 as the next ID. So when we add our string in our command, insert into, Customers, values 2, Sue and 22. So let's go with that. Happy days, that's worked. So if we just do a run, there we go, that worked perfectly. And if we go back into here, I'm just going to exit that and load it up again. I'm sure there's a way of refreshing it. I maybe need to learn that. Go inside customers. Now look, we've got Bob and Sue. Now the beauty about this is we can add, let's say there is another Sue and she's also 22. Come on, here we go. Let's go on it. I could change the details, but I don't need to. So here we go. Right, I'm going to step over this time, so F10. But the ID that it's giving me now is 3. So I've now got a unique ID. Execute the query. Everything's worked. Go into the database just to check. Here we go. Click on customers. Bob. And then we've got Sue and Sue. But it works because the ID is unique every single time. So it's perfectly reasonable we have two 22-year-old Sues. It's not reasonable that we duplicate IDs. IDs must be unique. So I hope that helps. So in this video, we have basically written a function that allows us to get a unique ID, so we can ensure that every single entry in my table is unique. Thank you very much.